Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating academic study by researchers Kashaf Zulfikar and Azam Sarwar. Their paper is called The Pakistani Cinema and the 1971 War, The Politics of Denialism, and it looks at exactly how recent films are navigating and in some cases completely rewriting historical trauma. We're going to keep a strictly neutral lens today as we unpack their findings and really look at the complex mechanics of how collective memory is built, challenged, and sometimes distorted right there on the silver screen.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, the 1971 historical reality. 2, the rise of denialist cinema. 3, the tactic of blame shifting. 4, reversing the victimhood. And 5, the cost of denialism.
All right, Section 1, the 1971 historical reality. Let's get the facts straight. Before we can really analyze how films might be manipulating history, we need to establish the actual historical baseline. According to the source, back in the December 1970 general elections, East Pakistan's political leader, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Awami League won a massive clear majority. They got 160 out of 300 seats, which gave them the mandate to form a government. But the study notes that General Yahya Khan and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto actually refused to transfer power. Naturally, this sparked massive protests over in East Pakistan. In response, by March of 1971, the Pakistani army launched a military operation to crush the unrest. This whole thing escalated incredibly fast into a devastating conflict, finally coming to an end when Bangladeshi forces achieved victory and independence on December 16, 1971.
Now, take a look at this staggering discrepancy in how the human costs of this war is remembered. Zulfikar and Sarwar point out this massive gap in casualty figures. So, according to reports submitted to Pakistan's post-war Hamid-ur-Rahman Commission, the state estimated the death toll to be around 26,000. But if you contrast that with the historical consensus cited in the study, those estimates are anywhere from 1 to 3 million Bangladeshi deaths, along with hundreds of thousands of instances of sexual violence. The authors emphasize that this extreme contrast is literally the foundation of the ongoing historical debate, and it's exactly this gap that modern cinema is stepping right into.
Moving on to Section 2, the rise of denialist cinema, from silence to propaganda.
To truly understand how the film industry handled this incredibly sensitive history, the researchers borrow a theoretical framework from scholar Gayatri Spivak called epistemic violence. Now, I know that sounds like a dense academic concept, but it basically just means silencing marginalized and victimized groups, effectively condemning them to mutism. When a state or a film industry just entirely ignores a history of victimization so they can create a sanitized, patriotic version of events, that is epistemic violence. They are denying the truth and just pretending the sufferers don't exist.
Let's trace how this epistemic violence actually built up over time in the Pakistani film industry. For decades, literally from 1971 all the way through the 2000s, there was this enforced amnesia. The war was just a complete blind spot. The industry stayed totally silent as a way to hide that history of victimization. Then, in the 2000s, you get the new Pakistani cinema emerging, bringing life back to the industry with a focus on social issues. But the really critical shift, that happens post-2020. The paper argues that as generations got further away from 1971, filmmakers could start approaching the war not as lived trauma, but just as narrative material. These newer films are heavily aligned with state-approved narratives, acting like a form of regional soft power, while completely obscuring the actual historical consensus.
All right, Section 3, the tactic of blame shifting, looking specifically at the case study of Kel Kelmay.
So the crucial point is that the authors actually frame this cinematic tactic as a form of psyops, or psychological operations. We're not just talking about innocent movies here. These are pre-planned discourses designed specifically to manipulate a target audience's emotions and basically rewire their interpretation of reality. They use really selective storytelling to push a state-encouraged narrative.
Let's look at the 2021 film, Kel Kelmay. The plot follows a group of university students putting on a play about the 1971 war. This study asserts that the film relies heavily on a strategy of both sidesism, basically claiming both countries share the guilt equally, while at the very same time it uses catchy musical lyrics to blame the entire separation of East and West Pakistan on a third-party Indian conspiracy. Through all this highly engaging storytelling and music, Zulfikar and Sarwar point out that the movie totally sidesteps Pakistan's shared responsibility and instead frames the Bengali resistance movement, the Mukti Bahini, as just puppets manipulated by India.
But you have to ask, does this kind of psyop actually work on everyone?
Well, the researchers looked at viewer reception, and they found it is incredibly polarized based on what the viewer already knows about history. For historically informed Bangladeshi viewers, there's a lot of active resistance. Take this IMDb review from Samiha Sumaya, which is quoted right in the paper. This movie is historically incorrect. Your ancestors killed 30 lakhs people. Don't play with historical facts to make money. This viewer clearly sees right through the historical omissions and calls out the cinematic distortion. But then immediately contrast that with a review from an audience member who likely didn't have that prior historical knowledge. Shahrukh Yunus writes, "This movie clearly addressed that false information and shows the true history." According to the paper, this absolutely perfectly demonstrates how cinematic denialism successfully overwrites the memory of uninformed audiences. For them, the movie literally becomes their primary, emotionally compelling source of historical truth.
Which brings us to Section 4, Reversing the Victimhood. Let's look at the case study of Huey Tum Ajnabi.
Objectively summarizing the premise here, Huey Tum Ajnabi is a 2023 love story set against the backdrop of the 1971 war. But the study goes in hard, criticizing the film for locking viewers entirely into the dominant historical perspective. The film essentially flips the script, framing Bangladeshi secessionists as the primary perpetrators of abuse and violence, while depicting West Pakistanis as the innocent victims. By doing this, the researchers argue the film tries to establish a false equivalence of victimization, pulling the focus entirely away from the documented genocide of Bengalis.
And this brilliantly illustrates how they do it. This is a fictionalized newspaper prop used right in the film's universe. Genocide, ethnic cleansing of West Pakistanis in Dhaka. The authors point out that when you fabricate physical evidence like this inside the movie's world, it creates this powerful reality effect that just absorbs the spectators right into that denialist perspective.
The study also brings in scholar Nayonika Mukherjee's concept of the spectral wound. This refers to the physical and social injuries that keep the memory of victims alive, specifically the Birangones, which refers to the hundreds of thousands of Bengali women who were subjected to genocidal rape by the Pakistani army in 1971. Zulfikar and Sarwar point out that Huey Tum Ajnabi completely ignores these horrific realities. In fact, the film distorts history by fabricating scenes of horrible sexual violence and enslavement committed by Bengali soldiers against West Pakistani women instead. It's an absolute reversal of the historical record, entirely to further an ideological agenda.
Finally, Section 5, the cost of denialism. Let's talk about the real-world impact.
So, what is the actual real-world impact of all these narratives? To explain this, the researchers rely on Rob Nixon's theory of slow violence. Unlike a sudden explosion, slow violence happens gradually and often completely out of sight. It's a violence of delayed destruction. The study argues that historical denialism on a movie screen isn't just harmless entertainment, it is an active form of slow violence. By denying the reality of 1971, these films lock in transgenerational trauma, they completely prevent healing, and they continue to fuel psychological pain and hatred between Pakistan and Bangladesh to this very day. The lack of an official apology, mixed with all this cultural disinformation, just endlessly haunts their interstate relations.
So how do the academic authors suggest we actually fix this? They lay out 3 essential, actionable steps to start dismantling these layers of denial. First up, societies have to actively re-examine their presumed facts and existing historical records. Second, there needs to be a real, concerted effort to correct the intentional distortions and omissions that live in mainstream narratives. And third, audiences and academics alike have to actively push back against denialist propaganda by uncovering and presenting a truly accurate, comprehensive account of the past. They argue that only by doing this can genuine healing and normalized regional diplomacy actually happen. We've explored how state-aligned narratives use film to commit epistemic violence, shift blame, and literally reverse victimhood. The source material makes it incredibly clear that a nation's collective memory can be deeply manipulated by the media it watches. So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on, not just regarding the 1971 war, but honestly regarding any media you consume. When cinema rewrites trauma, who pays the price of the illusion? Really think critically about how your own understanding of truth might be shaped by the screens right in front of you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning what you see.